I got evicted in a thunderstorm, and a billionaire pulled over like he knew my name, like I wasn't invisible in the rain. Tell me, have you ever watched your whole life slide out a door in wet cardboard and wondered who, if anyone, would stop? And if someone did stop, a stranger with money and decent eyes, would you take the key he offered or the pride you've been taught to guard? My name's Amanda. I'm an ER nurse in Charleston, South Carolina, and the Thursday I'm talking about smelled like bleach, wet asphalt, and the lavender from my mother's sweater that I still hadn't washed since the funeral. Two movers in yellow rain jackets carried my things like they were removing a problem, not a person. The box marked books split open on the curb, pages swallowing rain like it was the first drink they'd had in days, my nursing textbooks, and the romance paperbacks my mom loved most. The ones with women who get to win for once. My grandmother's blue flower quilt, hand-stitched starbursts, hung across a shoulder and sagged with water until it looked like it might rip down the middle. I said, "Careful with that, please." And the shorter guy squinted at me through the downpour like I was a bad connection on a phone call and kept walking. You know that line they make you sign when you get evicted? The one that pretends this is just paperwork and not a small death. That's what I scribbled, while the rain turned my name into a bruise. "Ma'am, we're done here," the mover said, like closing a check at a bar. He climbed into the truck, and the taillights smeared into the street like red watercolor. And then it was just me, the boxes, and the kind of rain that sounds like an argument you can't win. I sat on a soggy box and let it hit me. I let the fact that I had maxed out 3 credit cards to keep my mother comfortable while she died hit me. I let the part where the hospital I work for sent me notices about her bill hit me. I let the math that never adds up for women like me hit me. I didn't perform. I didn't square my shoulders like a hero. I put my head in my hands and cried in big, ugly waves, the kind that don't care what you look like. That's when the black SUV stopped. Not the kind that shows up with tinted windows and entitlement. This one rolled in like a question. The door opened, and he got out. Tall jacket that probably had a first and last name hair flattened to his forehead, boots already giving up the fight. And instead of talking down to me, he crouched in the puddle so we were eye to eye and asked, "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. The only people who ask, "Are you okay?" in a moment like that are cops writing a report or angels who forgot their wings at home. I went for the reflex. "I'm fine," the lie you use to keep strangers from stepping into your life. Then I caught the look in his face. Not pity, not the boredom of a man who thinks his time is expensive, more like recognition. And the word changed shape in my mouth. "No," I said. Small word, big crack like the first fault line before an earthquake. "I'm Chris," he said, and he held out his hand like we were in an office, like respect was still on the table. His grip was steady and human and warmer than the rest of the world. "That your stuff?" I nodded. "Okay," he said, like he'd just found a lever that fit. "There's a storage place 10 minutes from here. We'll get it dry and safe. Then we figure out next steps." Pattern interrupt. I didn't believe him. Not yet. I wanted to sure because I was tired and cold, and there was something about his voice that made you think furniture could rearrange itself if he asked it nicely. But I've been in emergency rooms long enough to know kindness sometimes carries a receipt. So I asked the only question that protects your spine in moments like that. "Why?" He didn't give me a speech. He didn't deliver a line meant for a camera. He swallowed rain running off his jaw and said, "Because someone helped me once when I needed it, and because nobody should be alone in this kind of rain." That was it. No sermon. No savior complex in a gift box. Just an answer simple enough to sound like a truth. 30 minutes later, 5 guys from a moving company I couldn't afford showed up like a rescue squad and treated my grandmother's quilt like it deserved a name. They handled my photo albums with the kind of care that makes you think someone taught them how grief works. Chris kept saying, "We'll figure it out later," whenever I tried to talk about the bill. And I hated that sentence the way you hate a beautiful dress in the window you can't afford. But I let it do its job. We loaded everything into a climate-controlled unit that hummed like a refrigerator full of second chances. When the door rolled down and latched, I felt my lungs open 2 clicks wider. The heat in his SUV punched the cold right out of my bones. I watched the wipers sweep rhythm into a day that had none. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he asked. No pressure, just a straightforward question. Pride is a loyal dog. It'll bark for you long after the neighbors have called the city. Mine barked. I still said no. Second crack. "I have a guest house," he said. And before I could tense up, before every Law and Order episode I've ever watched could assemble in my brain, he added, "Separate from the main house, your own lock and key, you don't have to set foot in my home unless you want coffee or to tell me to mind my business. I can have groceries delivered to the guest house so you don't have to see me at all. I'll give you my full name and my company. You can Google me, call someone, whatever makes you feel safe. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm giving you a way to check." "All right," I said, because he'd taken the wind out of the trap. "What's your name?" "Christopher James Dalton." "Dalton Development Group," he said like he was reading a phone book entry, and my cracked screen did the rest. Google filled in before I finished typing. Photos of ribbon cuttings and charity galas and a Forbes profile 2 years ago. Net worth I couldn't process on a good day. That face a little younger, less rain. I looked from my phone to the man in the driver's seat and back again, and my stomach did a slow, confused turn. You," he grimaced. "Yeah. Does that make this worse?" Pattern interrupt. "If it were you, would it make it worse? Would it make you safer because rich people are accountable in public, or more scared because power is a tool you can't lift? Which story would you tell yourself to get through the door?" I took the key. I inspected the locks. I texted the number on his card to make sure it wasn't a burner. I ran the water in the bathroom and cried at the sound, because hot water has a way of reminding you what a body is for. I put the quilt in the dryer and watched it go around like it was a prayer wheel. He sent food, real food, shrimp and grits, collards, cornbread, sweet tea, and a text that said, "No thanks needed. You're safe here. Lock the door." Sleep. I locked the door. I slept like I had borrowed someone else's nervous system. I woke up to birds and a slant of sun across the floor, and a quiet that didn't ask me to perform strength. I walked to the main house to say thank you properly, to set boundaries, to offer money I didn't have, in a structure that made me feel less like a stray, and his mother answered the door. Patricia was what happens when Southern steel puts on a silk blouse and a pearl necklace. The lines at the corners of her eyes said she had laughed exactly as often as she had fought. She looked at me, then at my shoes, then at the key in my hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, and when I said my name and guest house, she let me in like she was letting in weather she didn't trust. Her kitchen was the kind you see in magazines that make you question your backsplash. She poured coffee from a French press like it was a ritual with rules. "Christopher told me about yesterday," she said, gentle at first, "about the eviction and your mother. I'm sorry for your loss." She waited, then set down her cup with a sound that felt like a pivot. "My son has a good heart. He wants to fix things. That's dangerous for a man like him." She slid a check across the table. Not a proposal. An answer. $5,000, she said, perfectly calm enough for first month, last month deposit, and a cushion. You can start fresh somewhere else and Christopher can get back to his life. It's clean. It's kind. I stared at the numbers and felt two truths rise in me at once like twin tides. One, that money would solve the worst of my immediate problem and stop the bleeding. Two, that I would never be able to tell myself a story about that check that didn't have an asterisk. I don't want to take advantage of your son, I said. I didn't ask to stay. Women like you, she said, not unkind, don't have to ask. The world invites you to take what helps and calls it fate. She wasn't calling me a thief. She was calling me a risk, which sometimes feels worse. Pattern interrupt. What would you have done, be honest? Would you have taken the check and left with a thank you note and a clean conscience, or turned it down and risked the mess of a possibility? And is it fair for a mother to try to buy back her son's peace, or was she doing the math the world taught her? I need to think about it, I said, because that was the only sentence that didn't break in half inside my mouth. Of course, she said, and then she told me something that changed everything I thought I understood. 3 years ago, there was a woman she began, her name was Helena, and she took my son's softness and shook it until money fell out. $200,000 gone, and worse than that, his judgment, his trust. I'm not protecting his wallet, Amanda. I'm protecting the part of him that will pull over in the rain. I walked for 2 hours through a city that looks like it belongs on postcards and felt like a set. Rainbow Row, the Battery. People with umbrellas they bought in shops that sell tea towels with maps on them. My phone buzzed and it was work. And the thing about being needed is it makes you useful even when you feel like trash. We're short, the charge nurse said, which is the permanent condition of emergency rooms, and I said yes, because I know how to be useful. Before my shift, I left a note on the guest house counter for Chris. I thanked him for the food and the key and the decency of kneeling in a puddle to talk to me like a person. I told him his mother had offered me money to go away. I said I should find my own place quickly. I said I didn't want to be the problem his mother said I was. Then I put on scrubs that still smelled faintly like bleach and got in my car. The ER will remind you of your place in the universe whether you asked for that or not. Alarms become a choir you can't turn off. People show up on your doorstep, bleeding, breathless, bewildered. In a lull, Janet, 20 years and a woman with hands like a promise, sat next to me at the nurse's station and said, "We are champions at taking care of everyone else and terrible at letting anyone take care of us. Let someone carry a bag for you. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." I rolled my eyes and smiled, and then the doors flew open with a construction worker whose chest had met something it couldn't argue with. We did everything. Compressions, meds, airway, the whole algorithm, and the clock said the thing clocks say when a heart won't agree with us. I washed my hands and watched the pink swirl away like I could send the whole day with it. The room felt bigger and smaller at the same time. I got home at 3:30 a.m., and the garden lights made the path glow like a runway for exhausted people. Chris sat on the steps like a question waiting for its verb. "You're later than you said," he murmured, and I told him about the man we lost, and he said, "I'm sorry," in a way that didn't try to fix the sentence, and then he said, "I read your note." I told him about the check. His jaw didn't tense into rich man outrage. He went quiet like a man listening for a noise in the house. "Did you ask for it?" "No." "Do you want it?" "I want what it promises." I said a clean ending. But I don't know if I'd ever stop hearing the message under it. We sat shoulders almost touching, and the night made space for dignity. "I need to ask you something," I said, and my voice did that small tremble things do when they know they matter. "What if your mother's right about me? What if I've confused need with love? I don't trust my own motives right now. I don't want to hurt you by accident." He nodded. looked at the dark window of the guest house like it could watch us fairly, and said, "You want to know what I want? I want you to stop assuming you're a danger just because you're in danger. I want you to let help be help without attaching a moral class to it. And I want to see where this goes without the part of my brain, Helena injured, making all my choices." "Why me?" I asked. "Because that question lives under every good thing that shows up uninvited." He exhaled the kind you do before you tell the truth in a way that might break something. "When I saw you sitting in that rain, I recognized the look of someone who has been carrying everything alone so long, she forgot what shoulders are for. I used to have that look. A woman named Miss Dorothy helped my family survive a shelter when I was 16, and I haven't forgotten what her face did for us. Stick around," I said into the air, to you, to myself, because what happened next really did blow my mind. We made rules, real ones. I'd keep my key and my lock and my schedule. No gifts that touched money unless we wrote them down and shook hands like adults. He could send soup and make sure there were eggs and coffee in the guest house, and I could say no to everything, except the idea that I deserved to be safe for a minute. He said, "I'm not here to save you," and I said, "Hood. I'm not here to prove I don't need saving." And we laughed in that nervous way two people laugh when they recognize their own stubbornness. When he reached for my hand, he did it like he was offering me the option to pull away, and I didn't. In the morning we made coffee, the kind that tastes like someone with money bought the beans, and we stood in a kitchen that felt too beautiful for our worry. And then Patricia walked in, and the temperature dropped 3 degrees. "Christopher, we need to talk privately," she said. "Say it here," he said, and every muscle in my body asked me to leave, but I didn't, because avoidance looks too much like guilt when you let it. She'd talked to his business manager. She'd heard the words trust fund and new entity. She looked at me like I had my hand in a drawer it didn't belong in. "It isn't for Amanda," Chris said, calm. "It's for an affordable housing project." "Mom, it's been in the works since January. Call Richard." Patricia didn't blink. "Then I apologize for assuming," she said finally. "But assumptions grow wild when you water them with experience. Here's the twist I promised you. I thought Patricia was just a gatekeeper, a wealthy guard with a pearl collar. Turns out she was a map of my future if fear won. She'd been the poor girl once. She'd ridden a bus with groceries that bruised her fingers. She'd married a man with a toolbox and a plan, and then the plan worked, and the whispers started. She wasn't trying to protect his money. She was trying to keep him and me from being devoured by the part of this town that claps for charity and gossips over love. When she said, 'I owe you an apology,' she meant it, and when she asked, 'What do you want from my son?' she wasn't being cruel, she was being surgical. 'I want to see where this goes,' I said, because that's all my mouth would let me say without lying. Slowly, honestly, with nothing hidden under the rug, including the fact that I am scared out of my mind. I added, because I couldn't help it, 'I think I'm falling for him,' and my face grew hot, like I'd said a word I wasn't old enough for. Under the table, Chris found my hand and squeezed like we were in a small boat. Patricia looked at our hands, then at my face, and said, 'Then both of you be brave enough to tell the truth when it's inconvenient. Christopher, don't mistake fixing things for loving people. Amanda, don't confuse refusing help with strength. Months have a way of moving if you let them.' 3 months later, I had a used Honda whose ignition needed a prayer and an apartment on the east side with a sliver of harbor in the window and a lease with my name alone. Chris wanted to cover the security deposit outright, and I said no, and we argued, and we found our compromise. A small, low-interest loan with a written plan and automatic payments, so dignity didn't get bruised on either side. He put together a bookshelf with reading glasses perched on his nose, and Sarah, my best friend, narrated like it was a home improvement show, and we ate pizza on the floor and laughed, because laughter is apnea for pain. It gives you breath when you forget how. We didn't turn into a montage where everything is easy. I still woke up some nights with money anxiety riding my chest like a superstition. He still reached for his phone to fix problems with contacts when I needed him to sit with me in the mess. Patricia still had moments when she tried to preempt hurt by controlling the air. But we learned. We learned that help can be a conversation, not a transaction. We learned that apology closes distance faster than gifts. We learned that love is not a rescue, it is a presence. 6 months after the storm, he took me back to the curb where it started. The pavement had been patched, the kind of scar cities wear. He got down on one knee, without theatrics, and said, "This is where I remembered who I wanted to be." And I said yes, so quickly. We both laughed. And then I cried, because joy makes room for tears, too. He bought the building I'd been evicted from not to flex, but to change the math. He turned it into affordable units with rents that make sense to nurses and teachers and people who keep the city working. There's a wall in the lobby with framed keys. When someone moves in, they sign under their key and it stays there when they leave. On opening day, Patricia stood next to me and whispered, "I worried about the wrong things," and I said, "So did I," and we both wiped our eyes like we weren't. We got married on the beach, not the fancy private one, the real one, where families eat sandwiches and kids scream with joy at waves that have no interest in human plans. I wore my grandmother's pearl necklace, and he wore his father's watch, and Sarah gave a toast that made half the guests laugh, and the other half text their therapists. People online wrote about it like they were invited, and I stopped reading on purpose because the parts of my life that matter don't need to be litigated by strangers with free time. Some people called me lucky, like luck doesn't require courage. Some called me a gold digger, like affection is a shovel. Some asked what a man like him was doing with a nurse like me, and my answer is quiet, and not for everybody. I see him, not his money, and he sees me, not my bills. Let me say something that might make you mad, and I'm okay with that. Charity is not justice. A generous billionaire does not fix a country where an ER nurse gets evicted in the same city she saves lives because her mother died of a disease that the hospital bills like a subscription. The foundation. Chris and I started with Patricia, pays off medical debt for families stuck in the tar of it, and it helps, really. It does. I've seen shoulders drop and eyes clear when a number becomes 0. But bandages don't cure infections. If you're in the comments ready to type that personal responsibility solves everything, go ahead, I can take it. But tell me this. Do you think it makes sense that kindness has to show up in a black SUV because a system can't tell the difference between a bill and a person? Do you think that's fair? Every October, when the air remembers how to be cool and the sky practices rain, we go sit on that curb for a minute and watch the city do its messy, beautiful thing. One year, 5 years in, I asked him, if you knew everything, the fights with your mom, the days I shut you out, because I didn't know how to let good in the blogs, the looks, the learning curve, would you still have stopped? He didn't even pretend to think about it. Every single time he said, stopping was easy. Staying was the hard part. You want to know the hardest lesson I learned, the one I keep on a note inside my head, when the old shame tries to get a word in. That night we lost the construction worker. I stepped outside into the loading bay, and I screamed into my hands, not because death had surprised me. Death and I are unfortunate colleagues, but because I realized I had been trying to outrun need like it was a failing, not an ordinary human condition. The twist in my story isn't that a billionaire stopped. It's that I learned letting someone stand next to you isn't surrender, it's strategy. Shame is the villain. It writes convincing scripts in your voice. It tells you you're a burden if you admit you're tired. It tells rich men they aren't allowed to be soft. It tells mothers that fear is love. It tells women like me that independence without oxygen is the noblest way to die. We rewrote that script line by line, sometimes badly, sometimes late, sometimes with a fight and a walk around the block. But we rewrote it. I keep a spare blanket in my trunk. Not my grandmother's quilt that stays on my bed and smells like lemon oil in Sundays. And sometimes I hand that blanket to someone sitting where I sat in rain that thinks it's sermonizing. I ask, do you want me to make a call the way Chris asked me if I had somewhere to go? I don't tell them a story about pride. I don't offer them a check. I offer them a minute where they aren't alone. Maybe that's all any of us gets to do for each other on our best days. If it were you, what would you have done? Taken Patricia's 5,000 and disappeared with a clean ending, or taken the key and risked every complicated thing that came after? Would you date someone with that much money, knowing your name could turn into a headline you didn't write? Would you accept help when it shows up decent and messy at the same time? Or would you try to carry it all yourself to prove a point nobody's awarding trophies for? You know what I mean. I'm not tying this up with a gold ribbon. We still argue about whether to say yes to interviews and how much to put on Instagram and how to handle a gift without making it an obligation. Some days I still feel the old panic when I open the mailbox. Some days he still tries to outrun his past by future-proofing everything. Some days Patricia and I stare at each other across a kitchen island and then remember we're on the same side and laugh. Most days are just that. Days, with coffee and a commute and a text that says, "You home," and a reply that says, "Almost," and a porch that holds our tired like a friend. So here's where I ask you for something. And yeah, it's a call to action, but it's also a real invitation. Tell me in the comments about a time someone stopped for you, or a time you were the one who pulled over. Tell me if you think I made the right choices, if you'd have taken the money, if you think love should have to earn its way past public opinion, if you think our foundation is a bandage or a blueprint, if you've been where I was, on a curb in rain with a box labeled "Books Losing the Will to Hold Itself Together." Say so, because somebody in this community will see you. And if this story hit a nerve, hit subscribe so we can keep talking like this. Messy, honest human. Share it with someone who needs a reason to stop the car today. Your voice matters here. Your story does too. And if nobody told you this week, I'm glad you're still in it. And if you see someone in the rain, maybe check your mirrors. Maybe pull over, maybe be the reason they don't feel alone.